Gregg Braden. And my friends, this is one of the most powerful podcasts you will ever see in your entire life. And I am not joking about this. We have had 3 discussions with Gregg now. Not only does Gregg give us a masterclass on how to change your life through your emotions, he gives you a step-by-step on a meditation, an ancient meditation that deals with coherence and changing your brain, your immune system, your DNA. This man is utterly...
I believed I had done all the things in my life to lead a healthy and vital and active life.
We want to thank every single one of you guys for checking this out. I can guarantee you that this podcast, if you do even an ounce of the work that he has talked about here, you will change your life. So leave us a like, comment, please subscribe for the love of God. Check us out on Rumble and everywhere else. Check out thewayofwilljohn.com because there's exclusive stuff there, and we will see you guys later. Much love. Enjoy the podcast. Gregg, it's always so good to see you, and we've done this a couple times, and as we've talked about what we're going to do in the future, so some big things planned, and I know you have some big things planned, so before that, just let us know how you're doing and what's up.
You know, Will, first, it's good to see you. It has been a while since we've done this. I'm coming to you from our studio just outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico, in the cold, high desert today, and there is a lot going on in the big world, and there's a lot going on in my world. Right now, I'm focused. We have a new book that will be released January 28th. It's in the warehouse right now, and of course, people can pre-purchase it, but it releases January 28th. And this book, I'm excited. I'm always excited about the books, but this one, I did something I rarely do. I actually took 7 months without travel, because I felt like the content warranted the time and the energy to find the right words and the right perspectives and the right approach, and of course all the research. Typically when I write a book, Will, and you probably are aware of this, I write it on airplanes, I write it in airports, I write it in hotel rooms, and then pull it all together in the office. And this one I didn't do. So that's kind of what's up for me right now. We're putting all of our time and energy into a new book. The title of this book is called Pure Human: The Hidden Truth of Our Divinity, Power, and Destiny. And it is it's a celebration of our humanness. My goal in writing this is that the reader walks away definitely with a deeper appreciation for what it means to be human, but even a sense of pride. And the reason that I'm saying that is because the book was written to push back on the policies and the laws that are being enacted, proposing to replace our humanness with technology. We're talking about computer chips in the brain, AI, chemicals in the blood, RFID chips, nano sensors running through the circulatory system. There's a concerted effort to make big leaps in replacing our humanness with technology by the year 2030, within the next 5 years. That's not long at all. And this book is about the conversation. It's a twofold conversation. First, the fact that it's happening and what's driving it. And then the second part of the book, the science, the new discoveries, Will, that are telling us, man, we're absolutely not what we have been told. We're so much more than we've been led to believe. And it's mind-blowing stuff, showing that in many instances, human biology meets and even exceeds the capacity of the technology that we're being encouraged to accept into our bodies. So in a nutshell, that's what the book's about. I'm going to follow your lead. We can go as deep as you want to go. There's some pretty deep stuff happening around the reasons why we are being encouraged to replace our own biology. And it's a big conversation, and I'll just follow your lead wherever you want to go.
Is your brain productivity awful? Well, you need As a pro footballer, I'm always looking to improve my focus, my problem-solving skills, enhance my memory, and boost my mental alertness. I have got to stay sharp.
In all seriousness, every single one of us can benefit from razor sharp focus and zero brain fog. If you want the most out of your life, you've got to be at your best. Organized, balanced, and powerful. That's what you get from 𝗪𝗑𝗟. You're a modern human. That means you're staring at a screen, and this means you'll need to protect your eyes from screen fatigue. Well, guess what? 𝗪𝗑𝗟 is loaded with LoopMax 2020, which is going to support you exactly with that. 𝗪𝗑𝗟 is an all-natural product, so you'll see the best effects after a couple of months with consistent use.
Listen, my friends, learning a language is a tough thing, so check out the link right down below in the description box so you can grab yourself some and get that brain working. Promo code GOLOREMI20, 20% off.
Yeah, I mean, this is a subject, you know, we've touched on it, so I think it's proper that we do dive deeper, because in some of our other discussions we've danced around, you know, this subject and what's going on, and I know people definitely want to hear a bit more deeper into the subject. And so where I want to start with is there's a giant push for us to move towards this transhumanist society in which we offload all of our abilities, powers, thought processing power, and everything to a machine, to AI, to all of these things. And while there are clear benefits for our daily lives within some aspects of it, you know, a complete elimination of our human nature seems insane to me, why it needs to be inside of me or why it needs to control all my decisions. And so can you maybe just touch on this core, because I think it's the core central belief. The core belief is that we will be better off, or that there's something inherently wrong with us that we need to optimize by joining up with AI or machines in some nature. So why do we have that? And if not, what's the truth then?
You know, Will, what you're saying is this is a very complex conversation. It's a nuanced conversation, and that's why I'm glad we've got some time to flesh this out. What you're saying is true on one level. There's a bigger picture, there's a bigger context, there's a deeper structure to what's going on. And I'm just going to ask you, brother, you tell me, how deep do you want to go? You want to go deep, deep?
Go all the way. This is the Way of Will John
Okay.
podcast. You are free to do. Let's do it. The people want to hear it anyway.
All right. Well, there is a deeply spiritual component to what, and you brought up the word before I even defined it, transhumanism. The word trans means beyond. So transgender means beyond gender. Transhuman means beyond human. And there are layers, and what you've identified is one layer of the indoctrination that's leading us to this. I'm a scientist by degree. I'm a systems thinker. I tend to look at the big picture to see, you know, the structure of where everything is, and then zero in on the immediate moment of my life to see where it fits into that big structure. So I'm going to start with the title of the book, the subtitle, The Hidden Truth of Our Divinity, Power, and Destiny. I want to talk about divinity just for a moment. That is a difficult conversation for some, even in my genre. A lot of my peers don't want to talk about it. And the reason is because the word comes with a lot of baggage. Historically, divinity has been linked to religion. This is nothing about religion. The contemporary definition, if you look up divinity, it's interesting. Divinity is defined as our ability to transcend perceived limitations. And that's it. Transcend means to become more than. Perceived, I love this. The perceived limitations, will you and me and our friends and family and neighbors, most probably we're living within limits that aren't even real. Perceived limitations. We've been indoctrinated to see ourselves as limited in terms of our physical abilities, our biological abilities. I mean, it just goes all the way down the line. We've been indoctrinated through family, culture, society, history, science, false science, obsolete science, religion. So divinity is our ability essentially to be the best version of ourselves. And examples of this, the ability to imagine freely and to create and innovate, the ability to love fearlessly, the ability to forgive for the sake of forgiving without expecting something in return, the ability to heal our bodies, the ability to communicate the ideas that we have in our intuition and our love, these are all expressions of human divinity. All right. Now, I wanted to identify that first, because now I'm going to go to the big picture. The big picture is that we are living and are casualties of an ancient battle that began long before you and I ever came into this world. In the ancient texts, Dead Sea Scrolls, they identify this battle as a battle between what they call the sons of darkness and the sons of light. We know that battle today is a battle between good and evil. I was born not far from where you are right now, in northern Missouri. I was born in a rural area, northern Missouri, back in 1950s, 1960s. You know, we used to joke about good and evil. There was a little red devil on my shoulder here, you know, with pointy horns and a pitchfork, and there was an angel over here. Man, they're going back and forth. And that was the way we used to address good and evil. A lot of people today believe that this conversation is a metaphor. And what I want to say is evil is very real, and it is playing out in our world in deceptive ways. So this ancient battle between good and evil, it's been playing out for so long. There are different kinds of evil. There's technological evil. There's biological evil. There's psychological evil. There's kinetic evil, where troops are on the ground fighting in wars. That's kinetic evil. So the reason we're talking about evil is because it's a nebulous concept until we are able to assign a benchmark. As a scientist, I want to assign a benchmark. How do I know when something is evil? I mean, intuitively we can guess. And this is why I wanted to talk about divinity first. We can define evil. A benchmark for evil is anything that denies our divinity. Anything that denies us from being the best version of ourselves. Anything that denies our healing, that denies us our ability to love, to forgive, to imagine, to create, to innovate, to communicate, to share, is an expression of evil. All right? And the reason I wanted to have this conversation is because the transhuman movement that is proposing, it's already happening, that is replacing our biology with synthetics, in doing so, denies us facets of our divinity. Because once we begin to put computer chips in the brain, once we begin to put the artificial chemicals into the blood, we function very differently. We're still alive, we're still human, transhuman, but we are not able to access these expressions of our divinity. And so in a very real sense, this battle between good and evil is raising its ugly head. You know, and we all see it. We see it in entertainment. If you saw the Grammy Awards a couple of years ago, you saw satanic rituals playing out on the stage under the guise of entertainment. If you watch the ceremonies for the Olympics this year, 2024, you saw the pale horse of death from the book of Revelation riding down the river in France. It has nothing to do with the amazing men and women that have labored for years to develop their bodies and to compete in brotherhood and sisterhood and friendship to create unity in our world. We see it all over. I mean, we see it in the economic system that has enslaved so many people. We're seeing in social media that is denying us the ability to share ideas. So this idea of the transhuman movement ultimately is a form of evil because it denies us our humanness. It denies us our ability to express our divinity. And there are reasons for that. It's intentional. There is a structure. It's intentional. And the reason is because it's our divinity that frees us from fear. When we are empowered, we fear change in the world less. So when we are empowered, we fear one another less. When we're empowered, we are not even afraid. When we embrace our power, then we are less fearful of our own abilities. And we're all conditioned and indoctrinated to accept these limitations. So the less access we have to our divinity, the more vulnerable we are and the more susceptible we are to the ideas and the agendas of other people. And there are some big agendas out there that are being political, financial, economic agendas that are being pushed by the year 2030 is the goal, the stated goal from organizations from the, the WEF, World Economic Forum, all the way to the United Nations to, there's a reason they're looking at that 2030 expiration date to accomplish all of these things. So there was a sense of urgency when I wrote this book, graceful urgency. Urgency in the sense that we need to know so that we can recognize and make healthy choices. Graceful is that we have time. It's just if we're going to do it, now is the time. We've got to think of ourselves differently, and we've got to recognize the deep truth of what it means to be a human. And our young people, you and I are a product since the Second World War. The indoctrination has been that the human carbon-based life, and including human, that we are a flawed, F-L-A-W-E-D, flawed form of life. And because of that, we need something outside of ourselves to be successful in life and to compete in the world. And that something is being touted as technology. So the book is two parallel themes. One, the concerted effort to replace our biology, and two, the new discoveries, the mind blowers, man, that are telling us that we are so much more than we've been led to believe. We're only beginning to understand what it means to be human and what our capacities really are. So in a nutshell, I wanted to lay that out. We can tie into that through the rest of the conversation. Does that make any sense to you if I say it that way?
It makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense, which is why I'm going to do something interesting here. I'd like to play devil's advocate,
Sure.
which is something I haven't done. And if we have this divinity, or, if we are capable of displaying and being something greater than what we are displaying right now, why are we not showing it?
Because we are the product of a deception that began long, long ago. This fundamental battle. This is where it gets really interesting. This is the spiritual, not religious, but the spiritual nature of our lives in this transhuman movement. This fundamental battle between good and evil. In the old ways of thinking of a battle, we think of opposing forces where one force wins and another force loses. And we've outgrown that. We don't want to win this. We want to triumph. And the way we triumph, the goal, the purpose of the evil is to deny human divinity, deny us our extraordinary capabilities. So the way that we triumph is by living those abilities in our daily lives, by living the best version of ourselves, by imagining, creating, innovating, loving, forgiving, healing with our own natural abilities. That is how we triumph in this ancient battle. This battle apparently has been going on since the first of our kind appeared in this world 200,000 years ago. We've only been here 10,000 generations, 200,000 years ago. So one of the places people want to read about this kind of a battle, I think you have a very informed audience. I'm sure your viewers are familiar with something called the Dead Sea Scrolls. These were the scrolls that were discovered in 1946, 1947, in a series of caves, 11 caves in Qumran near the Dead Sea in Israel. The big deal is that they were the oldest records of the Old Testament that had not been edited, unedited, and they were 1,000 years older than the previously known works. Well, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. This is the way this works. In the very first cave, and the very first vase, these aren't like pickle jars. They were like 2.5, 3 feet tall, the clay vases that hold the scrolls. The very first vase and the first scroll that they pulled out of that is a scroll that describes our time in history. It's called the War, W-A-R, the War Scroll. And what's fascinating about this, it was discovered 46. It was not released until into the general public until 1991. The Vatican fought to prevent this from being released. Political entities, nations fought to keep this from being released. And you have to say, what could possibly be in a 2,500-year-old text that would warrant that kind of time and energy and money and effort? I mean, the attorneys alone. And the answer is that the War Scroll describes what's happening right now. We are engaged, and their language, this is their language. Right out of the scroll, it says a battle between the sons of darkness and the sons of light. And that battle has an expiration date. And we are apparently in the realm of time. I'm not saying it's this year or next year, but we're in that realm of time. The good news that the scrolls describe a number of battles that unfold. And these, I'm going to use another term, they're fractal. These are fractal battles. They're playing out then, they're playing out now in the way that they can play out now. And there are 7 in total. 3 are won by the sons of darkness, 3 won by the sons of light. That's 6. The 7th battle is triumph. The triumph is with the sons of light. But there's a catch, because the sons of light don't do it alone. There is divine intervention that is possible because humans have been willing to step up to accept their own divinity. In other words, when I was a kid growing up in northern Missouri, mom always had a saying. She said, God helps those who help themselves. You know, you're not just going to sit around and say, hey, make it better for me. You put forth the effort, and there's a force out there that's going to meet and help you with that effort. It's kind of what this scroll is saying. By humankind stepping into their own power and the power of their divinity, that is what enables us to receive the divine intervention to triumph in the battle of good and evil. So this is a spiritual perspective for what we're seeing happening in our lives, because everything that we're seeing right now is unfolding, and all of human history has been defined by this battle between the forces of good and evil, sometimes to a lesser degree. We're seeing it now because this 2030 expiration date, what we're seeing in the world are nations, corporations, organizations, individuals jockeying for the best position to be in when the convergence of all of these cycles happen in 2030. Everybody wants to get the best seat in the theater. And that's why you're seeing borders change, you're seeing economic systems change, you're seeing power structures change. And in some circles, Will, this is a very common conversation. And I fully acknowledge that for other people who have never heard of this is not common. This sounds like some pretty weird stuff, you know? And I don't want to dwell necessarily on this, because I want to talk a lot about the new discoveries of who we are, but those discoveries are happening within this context. The powers that be have identified what they call in 2030 the event, whatever that means. So they know that there is something happening in that year, and it doesn't mean it's on January 1st. I don't know what month or what date, but in that time frame. And it's interesting to me as a scientist, because there are cosmological cycles that converge right around that time. Our ancestors, indigenous ancestors, have left us information telling us that in their language, not in science, but in the language of the Hopi, or the language of the Maya, or the language of the Inca, or the language of our Tibetan brothers and sisters. You know, they're looking at the same period of time from a non-scientific perspective. So the powers that be sense that there is whatever the event is, and we could probably do a whole podcast on what that means. But the reason I'm saying it now is because what we're seeing in the world is not random. It's not spontaneous. And I have friends who are scared to death, Will, because they think the world is coming apart at the seams for no apparent reason, that it's all just happening. And that's scary, because you don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know why it's happening. And what and the book talks about this. There is a structure, there is a process, there is a system, there is an expiration date. We're not going to live this craziness forever, another 5 years or so. We'll get through it. And the question is, what kind of people do we become as we go through this? Do we allow the events of the world to drive us into the primal aspects of our hate and our fear? We just came through an American election, and this is exactly the principle that's playing out. And I'm not saying it's right, wrong, good, or bad. I'm identifying what we have seen is individuals who have so much hate for one person. They are blinded by their hate for one person to the good and the beauty and the possibilities that are emerging around them in the world. Their tunnel vision on their hate for one person. So this is a very deeply spiritual battle. And when we allow the events of the world to make us into something that we would never choose to be in a million years, when we allow the events of the world to make us want revenge or to drive us to fear, and we live our lives in chronic fear and hate, then we have succumbed to those forces of evil because we have denied our divinity. Those are not expressions of human divinity. So we all have a choice, and the purpose of the book is, I love this world, I love my brothers and sisters, and I want us to be aware so that we can make healthy choices, whatever those are, rather than blindly living and reacting to things that make no sense at all. That's where we find our power. There's a saying that knowledge is power, and the lack of knowledge is lack of power. So the more that we know, again, not to fear, but to recognize that there's a process, and where do we choose to be in that process?
thewayofwilljohn.com, exclusive content and programs on manifestation, making money, hidden knowledge. Finally, reach your full potential.
And tapping into that power is something that I discuss, and we've discussed only briefly before. And I want to touch on that because I think it's important, because like you said, knowledge is power. And when you're ignorant to something happening and you're ignorant and you're watching the world, you feel weak. And to feel powerful, I think it's important that people understand what they can do on a daily basis.
Sure.
What their thoughts can be, who they can surround themselves with, what sort of information they can surround themselves with. Could you give us an idea? And I think maybe this will lead into some stuff that you wanted to discuss on maybe the science and things that we are, some of the new discoveries, but how to tap into this more in a more concrete way, sitting down, all that stuff.
Yeah, it begins with the way we think of ourselves. It begins with our story. It's impossible to tap in to the deep truth of these extraordinary potentials if we don't see ourselves in that way. We are the product of at least 40 years of indoctrination telling us that we are weak, vulnerable, frail, powerless forms of life, flawed by our very nature. And among those flaws are things like human emotion, empathy, sympathy, compassion, love, forgiveness. Those are considered to be flaws in the transhuman movement. And they say, that's okay. We can fix those flaws. We will implement technology, artificial intelligence, computer chips in the brain that speak directly to our hard drives that circumvent emotion, that circumvent empathy, sympathy, compassion. I don't know about you, Will. I don't like living in a world with no human emotion. Could we manage our emotions better? Absolutely. Do we want to give them away in exchange for speed and efficiency of a computer chip? In my opinion, absolutely not. So now we've kind of laid out a context. There is a context, the battle between good and evil. Evil now we've defined as a benchmark, anything that denies our divinity. Divinity are the expressions of our humanness, the extraordinary potentials, all the things we talked about, imagination, creativity, love, healing, all of those things. So we've defined that that's happening. Now, the flip side the new science as a multidisciplinary scientist. My primary degree, I'm an earth scientist, but I happen to be an earth scientist during a really interesting time in our nation's history when computers were just coming into vogue. Everything had been done by hand. When I was in school, people were still using slide rules, if anybody remembers what a slide rule is.
No.
Before we had handheld calculators.
Wow.
And because the computers were coming into vogue at that time, I blended the earth sciences, the geology, with computer science, and we were doing subsurface mapping in computers. This is a whole new world. And I excelled in the computing industry more than in the earth sciences. So I have a multidisciplinary background. I became a senior computer systems designer for a company called Martin Marietta, now it's Lockheed Martin, during the Cold War years. And I say this because it gives me a multidisciplinary background to keep up on all the new discoveries. So there was a shift that changed everything about 5 years ago when it comes to the human body and the way we see it. Up until about 5 years ago, we thought of the human body in terms of sticky, mushy, wet, gooey stuff inside the skin and inside the cells. And we explored our potential from that way, and we published in biology books and medical books. 5 years ago, there was a new thinking that emerged in mass. I mean, there are other people that had been doing it for years, but about 5 years ago in mainstream science, scientists, medical professionals began looking at the human body not from a biological perspective, but from an IT perspective, information technology. And what they found, and I'm going to share this to help give us a reason to think differently about ourselves, and then we'll talk about practical applications. What they found was, first of all, the average human body has about 50 trillion cells, give or take. You're bigger than I am, so you have more than 50 trillion cells, but average about 50 trillion cells. Every one of those cells has an electrical potential of about 0.07 volts, which isn't much. But you do the math, 50 trillion times 0.07 volts, and you're talking about, I think, 3.5 trillion volts of electrical potential in one human body. I mean, what if we could harness that and focus it in our intuition or our healing or our strategy or our imagination? And it doesn't stop there. Every cell in the body is a circuit. It has an input, an output. It's got the equivalent of transistors, resistors, capacitors. Every cell in the body emits photons. Photons are particles of light. We emit light. You can record this if you've got the right equipment. And we receive it. Well, light, is information. We're receiving information from the field, from the world around us. Here's a beautiful one. DNA. What the scientists have found is that every successful genetic transaction in the history of our species is recorded in our DNA. We all have a record of our ancestors' past. And let me use the terms. It is transparent, it is immutable, and it is secure. And if those words sound familiar to our viewers, it's because those are the very qualities of the new technology that's changing decentralized finance. It is changing, the distributed everything. It's blockchain technology. Blockchain is powerful because it is transparent, it is immutable, it is secure. Blockchain technology mimics the way we store information in our DNA. Computer technology, the internet, mimics the way that we communicate between ourselves intuitively and within our own bodies. Other technology, we've had vaccines for over 100 years that attempt to mimic what our bodies do inside naturally. And the point of all of this, and it goes on, is that we are a soft technology. So we are not hard technology of computer chips and wires and chemicals. We're more than that. We are neurons and cell membranes and ion potentials moving across cell walls. And here's the beauty of all of it. We are so sophisticated that we don't have to know any of what I just said. If you want to think of yourself differently, I just gave you the reasons. One of the hallmarks of an advanced technology is that the more complex it is behind the scenes, the simpler the user interface. Or for example, my mobile phone right here, I just touch my finger on a picture, and I set into motion a cascade of events that will pay my bills and communicate with my friends. I have no idea. I don't have to know what's going on behind the scenes. Well, we work the same way. We are so advanced, highly advanced, technologically sophisticated, that our user interface is thought, feeling, emotion, breath, focus, and movement and nutrition. These are epigenetic factors. This is our user interface. So now these new discoveries, they're not published in biology books, they're published in these obscure tech, like IEEE, engineering journals, you know? But like, just for example, the Journal of Advanced Computing released an article in 2022. They published an article in 2022. And they literally said, I didn't know we were going to say this, I don't have it in front of me, but from memory, they said that human DNA, literally, it's not a metaphor, literally is a fractal antenna. So what does that mean? Antenna, we know an antenna tunes into signals. Well, a fractal antenna tunes into many signals across a broad spectrum all at the same time, simultaneously. And so now, look how different this is. They're not talking about amino acids and, proteins. We're talking about the body processing information to optimize our performance, to optimize our existence, however we want to apply it. If it's athletics, if it's healing, if it's just being the best version of ourselves every day in our lives. So these studies give us reasons to think differently. Now, I just want to share a couple of other things. When I talk about this at a live audience, and I have young people, younger than me, usually in the 20s, maybe 20s, 30s, something like that, and some in their teens, they have been taught to worship artificial intelligence, AI, and the computer chip. And so when I share with them the studies that were done through Stanford University, for example, where first of all, they look at the computer chip and they say, okay, is a computer chip fast? Absolutely. Is it efficient? Absolutely efficient. Is it scalable? How far can you scale a computer chip? Well, a computer chip can only scale until it reaches the limit of the physics of the stuff it's made of. If it's silicon, the silicon atoms are always going to be spaced the same way, and the information could only move so fast between those. So the scalability is finite. It's not an infinite scalability. Now, you look at a human neuron, or you look at the membrane of a human cell. What about us? Are we fast and efficient? We are. What is our scalability? When it comes to neurons, the answer is we don't know. Because every time scientists push the human brain and the human neuron to what we have accepted as the limit in the past, we do what we know how to do. And as we morph and we adapt to open a whole new vista, a whole new terrain of consciousness and possibilities. So, for example, when I was in school, the brain states, they stopped at 40 cycles per second. And they said human brain can't ever do any more than that. And there were four brain states, alpha, beta, delta, theta. And that was in the textbooks. They said, man, that's never going to change. Then the Tibetan monks came along and they studied them at, I think, UCLA. And the monks said, hey, if we do a certain kind of meditation, we can exceed that. And all of a sudden, they went from 40 to 80 cycles per second. And, the scientists said, well, okay, maybe we made a mistake. But the brain can't possibly process more than that. And the monks said, well, if we do a different kind of meditation, and then they went from 80 to 100 cycles per second, and they had to establish a new brain state called the gamma brain state. And the scientist said, okay, well, human brain can't possibly do any more than that. And the monks said, well, I mean, you know where this is going. They did a different meditation, and then they went to 140 cycles per second, and then 200 cycles per second, and then had to establish now the hyper gamma brain state. And then they went to the other end. A lot of people don't know this. They went to the other end of the spectrum. They were able to slow their brain state down to less than 1 hertz. Less than 1 hertz.
I've never heard any of that. Wow.
I know a lot of people, and we typically, this is where it gets real interesting. We typically think if somebody has less than 1 hertz brain state, we say that they are brain dead. These monks are very awake, very alive, very conscious in a very it's called the epsilon brain state. It's like 0.05 hertz, something like that. And they do it consciously, at will, on demand, and it enables them access to their bodies in deep healing states that is hard to achieve when you're in a conscious waking state. The point of all of this, okay, now, what is the upper end of the human neuron, of human brains? The truth is we appear to be infinite, because every time we reach the limit, we are so advanced and so sophisticated by design, I believe by design, and we can have the conversation of who and what gave us these abilities. But every time we reach that limit, we morph, we adapt to embrace the new conditions. And then they took, this is the last thing I'm going to say about this, they compared the human brain to a microprocessor. And the young kids love this. So they equated the synapse between the neurons, the little gap where the electrical information jumps from one neuron to the next. We've all seen pictures of those. They equated the synapse of the brain to the transistor on the tiny microchip. And interestingly, there's the number of synapses in the human brain is very close to the number of transistors on the most advanced microchips that we have today. So it was a good comparison. And what they found, there's a whole complex study. The bottom line is the human brain is 100-fold more efficient than the microprocessor. And part of the reason is because when we bring in information, we triage that information, and we send some of it to one part of the brain, some of it to another part, some of it to a different brain state, and then process and then bring it all back together. And we do it really well, really fast. So the human brain is the paper, literally the conclusion is that we're 100-fold more efficient than at least the processors that we have today. Now, maybe that will change with quantum computing. Maybe that will change. But the point of all of this, Will, is that we're not what we've been told. We're more than we've been probably even allow ourselves to imagine, because we're conditioned to think of ourselves in this limited way. I was a runner, a competitive runner, for over 20 years as an individual, and then I began running in corporate teams. In northern Missouri, I had my father. I come from a very dysfunctional, abusive, alcoholic family. Father left when I was 10. We were so broke. We lived in government subsidized housing, had to lie about my age and go to work in a factory it was a union job, the 12-hour shifts. So I worked 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. and didn't have time for intramural sports when I was in school. I never had time for that. So I lived my intramural sports life after I began working in the corporations, because at that time, back in the 70s and 80s, the corporations had corporate teams that competed. And we had triathlons, we had, of course, softball, they had volleyball a little bit. And I competed in the triathlons and as a runner, 3K, 5K, 10K, 20K. And one of the things that I found very quickly, if you cannot see and feel and believe that you are capable of covering those distances, those speeds, it's not going to happen. Your body responds, and I know athletes know. I was a gymnast when I was a gymnast in high school, And one of the things I learned, if you can't see, I was a pommel horse is what my specialty. If you can't see yourself in those positions before you engage your muscles and your muscle memory, it's going to be hard for your body to move through those positions. So we've got to, it begins with the way we think of ourselves. You know, the story of the 4-minute mile is a beautiful example of this. There was a sub 4-minute mile that was run in the late 1800s, just fractions of a second, under four minutes. And no one could beat that for 50, 60 years. And one day a man named Roger Bannister broke that record. And what was interesting was within 45 days of when he broke that record, other people were doing it all over the world. And then women began to do it, who typically had different times than men. They had their own standards. Now women, I just read a report recently, there are over 1,700, I think it's 1,780 women who now have broken the 4-minute mile in public competition. Wow. But the point is that someone had to do it first. Someone had to do it first, and they had to do it not in a closed room with no windows and no cameras and nobody watching because no one would know. They had to do it in the presence of other people who witnessed them doing what they had thought was impossible. And once one person did it, they became the bridge in consciousness, if you want to think of it that way, that makes it possible for the next. And it appears that we work this way. So our extraordinary capacities that the science tells us we have available to us, one of the reasons that we have not awakened many of those is we've been conditioned to believe that we can't. And when we begin, this goes all the way through remote viewing, telepathy, telekinesis, psychokinesis. It goes to advancing human biology, athletics. I mean, all of those things. We're so much more than we've been led to believe. And here's the beauty. In demonstrating those capacities, what we find is less of a need to bring the artificial and synthetic technology into our bodies because we are the technology. It's a very different way of thinking. We are soft technology that is so advanced that we can self-diagnose the errors in our system. Our body knows, DNA knows how to heal and repair itself. Cells, when they stop functioning, it's called programmed cell death, apoptosis. The cells die rather than reproducing a bad copy, which makes us sick. We know how to do that. We know how to self-actualize. I mean, that's how sophisticated this soft technology is. And when you really begin to get that, then you say, man, why would I want this stuff out here when I have these abilities? And the reason I'm passionate about this is because if we don't think differently, and if we don't accept our divinity, accept our humanness, accept our extraordinary capacities within these next 5 years, we're going to give them away to technology. And once we do, you can't go back. Once you embrace those into your body changes. You can't go back to what you were because you're not that anymore. So there's a very well-known author. Some of our viewers may know him. He's a science fiction writer. He's a futurist. He is director of artificial intelligence at Google right now, one of the directors of AI. And I don't know his precise title. His name is Ray Kurzweil.
Yeah, of course.
Ray Kurzweil came out with a book earlier this year. This is the year 2024. He came out with a book called The Singularity. And he is giving a heads up to an even greater degree of where this is going. What he says is very probably, if we don't change the way we think and if we don't push back on this transhuman movement, that very probably we are the last generation of what is called pure humans that this world will ever know. By the year 2030, he said, when you talk to somebody at the grocery store, you'll be talking to a hybrid of of biology and some form of technology that has either been voluntarily accepted or mandated into the human body. And then he says by the year 2045, we will become part of what he calls the internet of all things, the singularity, where everything in our world, every tree has a digital ID, every animal has a digital ID, all of our resources have digital IDs, we have digital IDs, and our information, our biometrics, our lifestyle choices, what we eat, what we consume, where we travel will all be managed by a massive AI that's already being built. This AI is already under construction right now. And the point is, this is all being put together by a handful of people that we didn't elect, Will. It's their idea of what they think is a better world, but we didn't get a say. And it's happening in ways that we don't often recognize. And that infrastructure is already being put into place. What we're going to see now in the next 5 years, between now and 2030, we're going to be encouraged, really strongly encouraged, in really sexy marketing to accept this technology into our bodies. And we're going to be told it will make us healthier. We're going to be told it makes us safer, a safer world. And maybe it does in some respects. So, the technology is not right, wrong, good, or bad. It's the thinking underlying it. If this technology was being developed from a benevolent force that loves the people of this world and wants only what's good for us, that would be a different story. But this is why we had the conversation that we had in the beginning. We're in a fundamental battle between the forces of good and evil. Evil is defined as anything that denies our divinity. The only way to reach the world that is proposed is for us to not only change the world around us, but change the world within us. And that means that we deny, or our divinity is veiled. So these are, from this perspective, this is an evil, a form of evil, an evil force that denies human sovereignty and human freedom and free will. And I think it's important that we know that this is what is happening.
So if I am to gather all this information that you're getting me, what I'm developing here as an athlete, of course, and you too, I'm developing the Gregg Braden workout plan. Okay. And now this Gregg Braden workout plan, what I'm seeing, this picture that I'm seeing form in front of my eyes is one with which you discuss the Tibetan monks, their ability to meditate and what that does and allowing them to touch on things. You've touched on nutrition. We haven't gone there. I would like to get there maybe a little bit at the end. Belief, which is, I think, the starting point. If you can't believe that it can be done, then it won't. And one point that we just had Dean Radin on, who I think you may be familiar with who he is.
Yeah, I know. I just actually had dinner with Dean in London not long ago.
All right,
yeah.
Dean's great.
I've known him for years.
Okay,
yeah.
So he did a study, or I believe it was his study. It may not have been, but in which case they had meditators. And they had also, it was his study, they had meditators, and they also had people who were engaged in ritual magic. And they also had people who were just meditators. And then I think they had another control group of some kind. And if I'm remembering it correctly, the meditators and the people who had ritual magic, or an understanding of ritual magic, performed better on whatever test that they had. And so my question comes to you, why is that? Because is that a deeper understanding of the world? Because ritual magic seems to me, little me, as some sort of external actions that I'm doing and not as strong as the meditator. So why do you think that is?
Yeah. Well, this is where the spiritual component of this conversation comes in. Both of those protocols may reach the goal. The question is, what have you become in engaging in the protocols to reach that goal? Have you reached that goal because of your love for what is possible, your love for the world, your love for your family, or are you reaching that goal because of your fear of what happens if you don't, your fear of other competitors, your fear of, the world, not having control in the world? That these are very outwardly, the outcome may look like the same, what it does to us to get to that outcome is very, very different. And this is why we keep going back. We're in a fundamental battle between the forces of good and evil. Which of those protocols is going to better support your divinity? And this is why we have these conversations, not to tell anybody what to do, but to give people a way to discern. And I'm going to use that word, not judge, but discern, to recognize, what's up. So yeah, Dean is doing some amazing work. Dean was instrumental in developing the Global Consciousness Project, GCP, where they planted 40 devices called eggs all around. It was in conjunction with Princeton University and Dean Radin and Roger Nelson and all of those guys. 40 devices around the world feeding back to one server. And those devices showed that when the people of the world focus their awareness on a single event, good or bad, it could be the U.S. Super Bowl, it could be the death of Princess Diana, it could be 9/11, it could be Mardi Gras. But the point is, when consciousness is not going through its random day and everybody's focused on one event, we actually create a force that can be detected and measured and recorded. And this is called the Global Consciousness Project. It morphed with the Institute of Heart Math when they emerged in Northern California, and that project now is rolled into what is called the Global Coherence Initiative, GCI. For transparency, I'm on the steering committee for the GCI projects. So we've seen this evolve over the years, and what it tells us is that we are deeply connected in ways that we probably sense intuitively. So if you're an athlete and you're in coherence with other members of your team, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, there is a level of intuition, a deep level of connection that comes, and we learned from that, we learned to anticipate one another's moves, one another's plays, if you're in a team sport, or if you're in an individual sport, supporting one another. This is telling us that we are deeply connected on those levels, and how we can go about using those connections in a healthy and a positive and a beneficial way. So you're talking about the Gregg Braden protocol. Everything you said is important. I think probably the most important thing, and we talked about this a little bit, I think in our previous interviews, we're the only form of life, Will, that can do what I'm going to describe right now. And I'm assuming there are people watching this that haven't seen the earlier program, so I apologize if there's a redundancy here to an earlier program. We're the only form of life that can harmonize the neural network in our brain with the newly discovered neural network in the human heart. 1991 is when the network in the human heart was discovered. 40,000 specialized cells, sensory neurites, are like neurons in the brain, but they're in the heart. And they think and they feel and they remember independently of the brain. We use them all the time. We're the only form of life that can consciously harmonize those two organs, two neural networks into one potent system, and then capitalize on the benefits that gives to us. And I'll describe some of those benefits. So the Institute of Heart Math, viewers that aren't familiar, is a pioneering research organization. They're based in Northern California, Boulder Creek, California, exploring the human heart in unconventional ways. So we all know the heart is a pump. And now what we're finding is that may be the least of what the heart does. You can build a machine to replace the pump, but now we know the heart actually creates hormones. It is a hormone originating organ. We never used to think of it that way. Now we know the heart. There's just so many ways that we could talk about this. There was a peer-reviewed journal. It's called the Journal of Complementary and Alternative Medicine that published a peer-reviewed report and said that the physical heart, now the evidence suggests that the physical heart is coupled to a field of energy and information that is not limited by the laws of time and space. What that means is we've got an organ inside of our bodies that doesn't follow the laws of physics. But we already know this. This is why you could say a prayer in your living room and your loved one in the battlefield of Afghanistan benefits from that prayer. And the studies show that there is a benefit. It's why a mother can intuitively know that her child is in trouble before she ever hears a phone call or gets an email or a text. She already knows it. And she knows when it's happening, even if they're separated by thousands and thousands of miles. So the human heart is designed for much more than simply pumping that blood. So when we create coherence, and I'll go through the 3 very, very simple steps here in just a moment and how we do that. What we do is we harmonize the heart and the brain. We optimize those systems. And there are 2 levels of benefits. One is passive, one is active. Passive means just by harmonizing the heart and the brain, these benefits happen without doing anything else. Harmonize the heart and the brain. First of all, you enhance the immune system tremendously. We're the only form of life that can consciously step up our immune system at will, on demand, when we choose, because we want to. No other form of life can do that. When we harmonize the heart and the brain, we awaken longevity enzymes that everyone has in the body. I mean, who doesn't want a stronger immune system? Who doesn't want longevity enzymes? We create resilience to stress. And athletic performance is all about how quickly and how efficiently we can embrace, not deny the stress, but embrace it, even redefine the stress into something really positive in our lives. And this is a powerful tool to do that. Longevity, heart rate variability, HRV. When we look at a heartbeat, we've got what's called a QRS complex. So it goes QR is the big peak, and then S. And we all know that the time from one peak to the next, to the next, to the next, the time varies just a little bit, but it varies. Well, here's the thing. The greater that variability, the more resilient we are to stress and change. So when we're kids, we got tremendous heart rate variability. Typically, as we age, not for everyone, our heartbeat becomes more regular, and those times become more set, very close. The one is very close to the one before it. Through creating the coherence between the heart and the brain, you can create greater variability, just like when you were a kid. And it doesn't make any difference how old you are. And you can do it in a heartbeat. It doesn't have to take a long time. It's just about the way that you're engaging these systems. So these are passive benefits. Just from creating the heart-brain coherence, these are passive benefits. Active benefits. That means once you're in that space, you can do other things. Super memory, super learning, super cognition. So if I were an athlete on your team and I had a bunch of plays I wanted to remember, and I was a coach, I would take my team into heart-brain coherence first, and then introduce them into those plays. And here's the reason, and what you find: super memory, super cognition, super memory. And here's the reason. If you try to learn those with your brain, the brain is a magnificent organ, as we already described, but it's a polarity organ. So you got left and right brain. Left and right brain is always going to see what it learns in polarity. So yours is going to have right, wrong, good, bad, success, failure, worthy, not worthy, healed, sick, all of that. When you harmonize the heart and the brain, well, what you do is you move your awareness out of the polarity. The heart is not a polarity organ. And then you can objectively take in new information without judging. That's the ego. The ego is the left and the right brain. So when people say, when's a good time to do coherence? My answer is everything goes better with coherence. I'm a musician, I'm a guitar player, and if I go into coherence before I'm playing, it makes all the difference. I can watch another guitarist that I admire, and I can then mimic what they're playing very quickly if I am in coherence. If in my brain, I'm studying it and I'm trying to remember it, and it becomes an obstacle. So it's a different way of taking information in the body. So you become more objective, and in your objectivity, and also this helps in competition, because if you're in your brain in competition, then your opponent, whether it's a boxing, I saw this as a competitive runner, team sports, they can psych you out, and they're trained to do that, and we all know that. And sometimes it doesn't bother us, and sometimes just for whatever reason it does. They'll say something that'll get to us because we're hearing it through the polarity of the brain, and we're going through, worthy, not worthy, right, wrong, good, bad. Going into coherence before you perform athletically takes you out of that polarity. Now you are objective. Your opponent, they can say, "Hey, man, your mom was great last night," and your mother wears army boots, or whatever, and you just listen to it and you say, "Yeah, whatever," it doesn't bother you. So now some people have the mental shield to discount those things anyway. The issue with that is that there's a part of us that still hears it, and it can subconsciously, it can wreak havoc on subconscious beliefs. So coherence is a very powerful tool. Doesn't change, it makes you more alert. Your visual acuity is greater. Your perceptions of the world around you. So I'm a martial artist. Before martial arts, this is the thing to do. If I'm going to have a tough conversation with a business partner, with a book publisher, I'll go into coherence. So when they unload on me, doesn't change what they say. It changes how I feel and how I respond, and I'm less likely to say something that I regret later. And we've all done that. We've been on a call, you write a text and you fire it off, and man, you say, I wish I hadn't done that, It's too late. So it helps us, it empowers us to be objective and non-reactive so that we could be the best version of ourselves. That is an expression of human divinity. That is something synthetic technology, AI, and computer chips cannot do these things. So everything we're talking about is not separate. Now we're diving down into practical applications of what it means to embrace the truth of our divinity.
It's so incredibly interesting because it reminds me of a video I saw of Bob Proctor, the late Bob Proctor, who was quoting Thomas Troward, and that quote was, "Order is heaven's first law." And I'm sure you've heard that before.
Yeah, I didn't know where that came from, but
so it's from Thomas Troward, and his books and his stuff and the Edinburgh lectures and things like this are very tough read. Tough in the sense that you've got to dig in and want to learn from them. But the talk of coherence, and I remember where else I'd heard this from before, is because Bob Monroe and these the gateway programs and coherence and stuff. I've tried those. I can attest. It's otherworldly, and like you said, there's that passive and that active. There's that passive when you just do it and things just kind of feel, they have this essence into them. It's amazing. So I know there is stuff within it that can truly change us, and it's a matter of actually being able to do them, right?
Sure. Well, the science gives us the reasons to think differently about ourselves and to believe. All right. So the science shows us what the potential is. Our conditioning is what limits us. And it has to be a choice to think differently about ourselves. And then the practices are the way to implement this. All of this is happening within this umbrella of human divinity and the conditioning. We are all casualties of decades of conditioning to deny human divinity. There's another piece of this. when you're in competition in sports or whether you're on a battlefield, there is an opponent either way. And, we don't look at the opponents. We look at the opponents as something that we want to overcome. And these principles are very, very powerful. There's a deeply powerful spiritual principle. When we have an opponent, we have to evoke what we call our warrior. It's the inner warrior, and we all have the warrior. The question is this: outwardly, we may defeat that warrior. We may kill them on the battlefield or trample them on the athletic field. But the question on a deeply spiritual level is what motivates us? What do we become? Do we defeat that opponent from our love of those behind us, family, friends, team, loved ones that believe in us and our desire to be the best version of ourselves? Or do we defeat them from the anger and the hate and the rage or the sense of revenge that has been triggered through media or, whatever it is that is happening out there that evokes that anger, that hate within us? You might have the same outcome. The question is, what do we become as we go through that process? And what I have found personally is that when I am able to engage an opponent from my love of what I know is possible, from my love of those that believe in me and support me, and the family and friends and loved ones behind me, rather than my hate for the person or the force in front of me, I'm a better person for that, and I'm also more effective because I'm able to draw on my skills from that place of wanting to be the best version of myself rather than wanting to destroy another person. So these are very, very, they're subtle, they're deeply spiritual principles, but they all tie into everything that we're talking about right here. And I think ultimately, the bottom line, I know a lot of things we're saying, and I'm going to acknowledge it's a different way of thinking for some people, and I totally get that. We all learn differently, and that's why we have these conversations. Without even embracing everything that we've said, I think it all comes down to love. And the question is, do we love ourselves enough to accept our humanness, to accept our divinity and the responsibility that comes with our divinity? Do we love ourselves enough to embrace those things in our lives to the best of our ability? And that's a question that you don't answer with words. You answer through the way you live your life, the way you talk to other people, the way you let them talk to you. It's through the choices that you make as a man or as a woman in this world. That's your answer. Do you love yourself enough to embrace your divinity? And again, the definition of divinity, our ability to transcend perceived limitations. Do you love yourself enough to live the best version of yourself fearlessly, kindly, lovingly, to love fearlessly, to imagine, create, innovate, and share your ideas? And really, I think it all comes down to that, Will, and the concerted effort to take that from us through the transhuman movement that wants to replace all of these abilities with artificial components that can't do that. Computer chips can't have empathy, sympathy, and compassion. They don't know how to love. They are efficient, they are fast, and these are all choices that we're going to have to make in our lives.
And you mentioned loving ourselves and love being this key, and I can see no greater way than what you put in your body as well. And I know you touched on nutrition, but I'm very, very curious as to what that means, because it's a minefield trying to find your way through it. So what is the science, or what are you seeing there?
Well, yes and no. It can be really, really simple. So from everything that we have just said, I think perhaps one of the greatest tasks that we have in life is to honor, care for, and protect the gift of our humanness. Because if we don't have a healthy body, it's really hard to access the divine principles. It's really hard to imagine and create and innovate and love and forgive when you just feel like crap, or when your body is not functioning. We live in a society, unfortunately, where the forces of good and evil are work in nutrition, and we've been conditioned to nourish ourselves with things that actually destroy the human body. We could go through, Will, food group by food group. We could go through cooking oils. We could go through, supplements, and I'm happy to do that. But the bottom line for me, in one of those 2,500-year-old texts, there was a sect, S-E-C-T, a sect that was known as the ancient Essenes. They appeared about 500 years before the time of Jesus. Jesus was an Essene. During their time, they were called therapeutae. They weren't called Essenes. They were called therapeutae because they knew how to heal. They understood the human body. And Jesus of Nazareth, not as a religious figure, but as a learned man, was educated in these traditions. And so when the disciples asked him, Master, what is it that we should use to nourish our bodies? What should we eat? He didn't go through all the food groups and all the oils and all the supplements and everything. What he said then, 2,500 years later, I live to the best of my ability in my life every day. And what he said is this. He said, that which gives life to your food also gives life to your body. And that which denies life to your food will deny life in your body. Therefore, eat only those things that give life to your body. That's pretty clear. The closer you can get your food to its natural state, the more efficiently your body is going to be able to uptake, more bioavailable the nutrients are going to be, and the better your body can break those down and use them. I just went to, I've been on the road on a media tour. I came home and went to my local market, and I was just really conscious of how many products are on the shelves that have never seen the light of the sun, have never seen the soil under our feet, that we call food, that was processed 100% inside of a machine. And this is what we feed to our loved ones. I see mothers who, I know they love their families, they love their kids, and they're well-intentioned, and they're picking this stuff up to give to their kids. It takes effort. It takes a rethinking. But I tell you, born and raised in northern Missouri, man, nobody talked like this to me. I wish I had known. I wish I'd known then what I know now. I just turned 70. I turned 70 a couple of months ago, and I don't know that I could have made it to 70 if I lived the way I was taught to live in my community back in the 50s and 60s. So I have had to break through a lot of the conditioning. And it takes time and energy and research to find out what's good. But the general theme, if the closer it is to its natural state, the better it's going to be for your body. Now, within that, you get to make all kinds of choices. If you are a non-carnivore, if you don't eat meat, then you have to make some choices. There are certain fish. I'm a non-carnivore is what I'm saying as an example. And I have been I couldn't eat meat as a kid. It literally made me sick. So I've eaten fish. And salmon, we all know, if it's wild-caught salmon, has all of the essential fatty acids. It's a high-protein fish. It is high in antioxidants. Halibut is a white fish, but it also is high in protein. Vegetables, there are different kinds of vegetables. Cruciferous vegetables will save your life. Cabbages, Brussels sprouts, broccoli. I ate broccoli as a kid every day, and I didn't like sweets. And my father thought there was something wrong with me. He said, "Man, what's wrong with you? You don't like chocolate." And I never did. But I've eaten broccoli all my life, and I think it helps to offset a lot of the toxins that we see in the world today. One of the hidden dangers of the foods that we see today is a It's an enzyme called, or it's a protein that is called lectins. And lectins are found in some nuts. They are found in oats, and they're kind of like in the family of gluten. If you're gluten intolerant, you're probably lectin intolerant as well. They're very hard on the biome and on the gut. So, you begin eliminating things like that. So actually, white rice is better than brown rice. Brown rice is high in the lectins. That's not what we're typically told, but a lot of the world eats white rice every day, and they do really well with it. Oats, I love oats, and oats have a lot of benefits. They also have a lot of lectins. So you have to prepare the oats. You have to soak the oats. Same with quinoa. You have to soak that quinoa overnight and wash it to eliminate some of the external lectins that will destroy the gut biome. Create what's called leaky gut, leads to rashes on the body, poor digestion, all those kinds of things. So you have to start working your way down through those kinds of things. But and most people know what works for them and what doesn't. But the bottom line is, the closer we get our food to its natural state, the better we're going to be.
And on one of the other aspects that you mentioned in that 6, and I'll have to go back, but you mentioned emotion. And I don't want to just touch on the superficial nature of our emotions and just saying when one gets angry, one gets happy. But I know this myself, and I know by watching and listening to many of the talks and things that you've given, the mastering of your emotions and essentially utilizing your emotions in a proper way can be tremendous to help you not just feel better, have a better immune system, and to get what you want, or almost as a manifestation tool.
Sure.
Could you maybe just touch on how we should go about, regulating, understanding, and utilizing our emotion in the best way to be better?
Sure. So first I'm just going to back off and say that the best science of the modern world is now documented. Every organ, every gland, every tissue in the human body has the ability to stop the deterioration that it's experiencing, to stop it, and then to heal the damage that is created, and then to reverse and actually rejuvenate that tissue. Even organs and tissues we were told could not. Brain tissue, spinal cord tissue, pancreatic tissue, heart tissue, but there's a catch. And the catch is that the organs, glands, and tissues have to be immersed in the proper environment. So when we say environment, people think, the air and the water, and of course, all that's important. The most important environment is the emotional environment. And for many of us, and especially as men, the emotional environment that we portray to the world is not equal to what we're feeling inside. We mask those emotions, our loves and our fears. So the emotional environment, fear is one of the most destructive emotional environments. And I don't know how deep we won't have time to go that deeply into this, but I'll say it like this. Every emotion that we have ever had in our lives, even in our mother's womb, our body creates a chemical equivalent of that emotion. And it's called a neuropeptide. There are entire studies done with neuropeptides. So we literally have fear chemistry, hate chemistry, jealous chemistry, love chemistry. And so we're always creating this chemistry in our bodies. There are a lot of emotions, but they essentially come down to love and fear. So hate, jealousy, these are expressions of fear. So when we are enveloped in love, and it doesn't always mean love for another person. I mean, there deep love for our own body, and the deep appreciation for the gift of our body and what we're capable of, and what it means to be human, and what it means to walk this earth as a human. I mean, these are very deep spiritual concepts, but it is that love that floods the body. And it floods the body with very powerful chemistry that allows us to optimize. My dear spiritual brother, my friend, my colleague of 30 years, Dr. Bruce Lipton, we tour together a lot. share the stage a lot. And as a biologist, he is very clear about this. Our bodies are either in the healing and regeneration and rejuvenation mode, or they are in the fight or flight mode. So even though we may portray being cool on the outside, if we're in stress and fear inside, and there's a reason I'm going this way, if we're in stress and fear inside, then our body is, all the energy in the body and the systems are managing the stress and the fear. So the regeneration and the healing and the rejuvenation that we need for performance suffers from that. So stress, it all comes down to that stress. Now, there are different kinds of stress. There's the emotional stress, a bad relationship, fight with a partner, traffic, on the freeway. We all know about that. But there are kinds of stress that we don't know about. When we eat food that is processed with bad oils, our body has to compensate for that internally. That's a form of stress. We're trying to balance out that pH. We're trying to compensate for those rancid acids, maybe in the buffalo wings or the French fries, or whatever it is. That's a form of stress. When we drink water that is impure, we might feel fine, but underneath, internally, our body is working behind the scenes to balance out and to reconfigure those water molecules and those toxins. That is a form of stress. So the reason I'm saying this is, and this is probably where I'm going to have to close with this, is when we harmonize the heart and the brain, creating heart-brain coherence. One of the benefits that I did not mention, because we had a whole list here, is that it relieves stress all the way down to the molecular level. So by creating the coherence in the body, what we're doing is actually relieving stress at the cellular and the DNA, the molecular DNA level. And it's as easy as 3 simple steps. And those 3 simple steps is a shift in focus, a shift in breathing, and a shift in feeling, a shift in emotion. We do it for about 3 minutes once a day, a minimum of 3 minutes. What the science shows, only 3 minutes of solid coherence. I mean, you can do it for a little bit longer. There's no limit really, but 3 minutes will increase the DHEA levels in the body over 100% without any change in supplement or diet or exercise or anything. DHEA is the precursor to every hormone in the body, including testosterone, including progesterone, including estrogen, and men, we all have estrogen as well. You want to keep those balances good. So if you want to build more testosterone without chemicals, what you're going to do is you want to relieve that stress so that you can create more DHEA to create that testosterone. But also there are testosterone boosting foods. Salmon is one of those. Avocados is another one. Walnuts. Walnuts are a very special kind of nut that's different from, they don't have the lectins. They've got all of the essential fatty acids that we need, and they are really good for building testosterone. So I just mentioned I turned 70 this year. I do supplement, but not with testosterone. I had my physical in January, and my testosterone was right around 630, 640, something like that, and which exceeds what is typically seen in a 70-year-old. It's usually of a man around in his 40s, something like that. Wow. And the clinician said, are you on TRT, testosterone replacement therapy? And I said, no. Yeah. Also, load-bearing exercise, resistance exercise, and we all know that in the gym. Load-bearing exercise will temporarily boost the testosterone, but the diet and now this component of heart-brain coherence, bumping up that DHEA, which is the precursor for all of those other. Once the DHEA is there, your body then will draw on how much it needs for the different levels of the hormones. It'll take whatever it needs for your estrogen, whatever it needs for your testosterone. You're just making it available so the body can do what it needs to do. So how do you do this thing? It's very simple. First step is you want to, first of all, don't do this while you're driving or operating heavy equipment. Okay, do it in a place that's safe, in a room that's quiet, typically. Close your eyes, of course, and you shift your awareness from the world around you to the world within you into the heart. And one of the ways that you focus on the heart is just gently touch your heart with a finger or two. Spiritual traditions, you'll see people do a mudra like this, or they'll take their whole hand like that. You don't have to do any of that if you don't want. Just touch your heart, because your awareness will always go to the place on your body where you feel the touch. That's the key. So touch your heart and allow your awareness to go to your heart and settle and focus into your heart. That's the first step. The second step with your focus on your heart is to slow your breathing to a ratio. And everybody breathes differently, so I'm not going to give you the numbers. But the key is you want the exhale to be for a period of time longer than the inhale. So I'm at 7,000 feet in the high desert right now. My ratio is 4 to 6. 4 counts: 1,001, 1,002, 1,003, 1,004 is the inhale, and then release 1,001, 1,002, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the exhale. That will trigger the parasympathetic nervous system into the relaxation response. Focused in the heart. So now your awareness is in your heart, focused in the heart. You're breathing slower as if it's coming from the heart. And to the best of your ability, you maintain that. And from your heart, you consciously choose to feel a positive emotion because you want to, rather than waiting for the world to give you the reason to feel it. This is, no other form of life can do this. Emote by choice, not in response to what the world is showing you. And once we do that, and what scientists have found is gratitude pretty much works for everybody 100%. You can do compassion, care, appreciation, but gratitude pretty much works for everybody. And it is the feeling, so the shift in awareness, the shift of the breath sets the stage. The feeling of gratitude begins to send a signal from the heart to the brain. That optimum signal is 0.1 hertz. It's a very low frequency. 0.1 hertz, optimum frequency, optimum coherence between the heart and the brain. You hold this process. It is an active focus in the heart. It's not a relaxing, zoning out, letting go, spacing out. You don't want to do that. It's an active focus in the heart. And you have to work at focusing for 3 solid minutes. Right. Your mind will wander. You have to come back and you just hold that focus. Do that 3 minutes once a day. I do it at bedtime so that when I go to sleep, I'm in a healing mode. I do it again if I'm going to have a tough conversation or a tough phone call, or if I'm just having a tough day. I've done it every day since 1994 when I became affiliated with the Institute of Heart Math. At least once a day. So that is the benefit of self-regulation. We're self-regulating our body, self-regulating the immune response, and relieving that stress on a molecular level as well. You know, when it comes back to the book, again, my hope is that the reader walks away with a deeper appreciation for the gift of their humanness, of the role of divinity in our lives and what it means, and maybe even a sense of pride, because I am deeply proud to be a human, and I believe we're worth preserving, and I think we have to be vocal about what it is that we cherish in our lives if we don't want to go down that road that so many of those futurists are now envisioning. And Will, you've done an amazing job of creating a community, which is more important than ever. And you're the hub of that community. And I just want to, before I jump off here, I just want to thank you for your trust, and trusting me with your community, and all brothers and sisters that trust you and check in with you. Brother, you trusted me to be with them today, and that means a lot. So thank you.
No, thank you. Listen, it's always incredibly inspiring listening to you. And I know everybody gets so much of it, which is why we have these discussions. And I've been a fan of yours for many, 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 many years, almost a decade now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Listen, thank you as always. We will link to everything. We will link to your book. We'll link to all the other stuff that you're doing. And listen, we appreciate it.
All right. I look forward to our next. God bless. Have a beautiful holiday in this holiday season. And I'm going to jump off onto, I've got another interview waiting for me right now.
Good luck.
Take care, brother. Thank you. Bye-bye.